finally acquiesced. Then the scene shoots to when they're on a ship. Okay? Now, this is important. See, it's not only words, the words in the script we must analyze, but it's, you see, when you create the movie producers and directors and actors and writers, what they're attempting to do is create a grand drama on this particular plane, and whatever intent that they had in creating the story is the objective is to have that intent manifest itself out on this physical plane. Okay? So we must analyze the props, the set, the background, the scenery, everything tells a story, not just words on the script being spoken by the actors. So remember, on the ship, the powerful scene on the ship was that there was ships from, I guess, New York area down to Georgia, the South, which is not that long of a voyage. They were fully clothed. They were sitting down, able to move about the ship. And so it would be possible for that voyage to actually occur. They're fully clothed. It's not that long. It's not like a 4 or 5 month voyage. They'll have sufficient water and food for that voyage.
Right.
See, that was telling, because the cover story, the color story that we get in school is that they shipped millions and millions of Asiatics from another continent to the Americas. Right?
Right.
But they never explained to us how they managed to pull that off. Because if you think about it, the story that we were told, and that very scene in the movie, actually, the subliminal message to us is that this is the possibility that could have happened, not what you were told. Why is that? Because think about this here. Because this is what no one has explained and can explain. If so-called Europeans who were pale, slaves, okay, that's what they are. If slaves took Asiatics from the place that's modernly called Africa to the Americas by the millions, we have to ask this question. How did they pull that off? Because they would have had to have infrastructure, sophisticated infrastructure, to pull that off. Because if you're taking people from one location that you know nothing about to another location you know nothing about, you're going to have some incredible ability, almost superhuman ability. Because the question is, how are you able to feed the people, give them water? And the images that they give us is that they had hundreds of them chained like sardines on the bottom of a wooden ship, right? Am I correct?
Right, that's true.
Now, I don't know if anybody ever been out on the high seas on a ship before, but it is freezing out there. And during those times, the ships were all made of wood. And if you're on the bottom of a wood ship, naked, for 4 to 5 months, impossible. You couldn't survive that. Why is that? Because, first of all, let's deal with some of the stuff you have to deal with for that possibility. Now, so we're talking about pale-skinned Europeans going to a place they know nothing about, a place currently called Africa, and then taking the people to another place they know nothing about. So, if you're tied down and you can't move and you're chained for 5 months and you're naked on a wooden ship, what's going to happen? Think about that. What's going to happen? Okay, so you can't move. You're not exposed to sunlight. You're sitting down there. You're wet from the water that's seeping up inside of the ship, and you may have a bowel movement. You may have a bowel movement within 5 months. I would say that would be natural to have a bowel movement, correct?
Right, exactly.
So you have all these hundreds of people with having bowel movements, and they may urinate as well during that time. That's a possibility.
Right, exactly.
So they're urinating, their bowel movements. And if there are females, I assume that there are females, you're going to have menstrual cycles once a month. And if it's 4 or 5 month voyage, that's 4 or 5 times during that one voyage.
Oh, yeah.
So you have all those chemicals mixing together.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have spiders, bugs, maybe on a wooden ship, and most of all, you're going to have rats. And I don't know about other men, but if I'm naked and there are rats coming up, what do you think is the first thing I'm going to try to protect?
Oh, yeah.
A growing area.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
A growing area.
Yes.
So now they say, oh, well, you guys are strong. You could take anything. You didn't need food. You didn't need water. You guys are strong. You guys can survive. That's the cover story that they tell us. Nonsense. So if anybody's purporting and pushing that nonsense, have them do a test simulation. No one would do that. Take a wooden ship from the 17th century and do the actual travel. You tie people down on the bottom of that boat at night in those conditions. After 2 days, they're crying to get out of there. So, and then let's just say that they arrived safely at the destination in the Americas. Now, the Europeans didn't know anything about America. So you have all these millions, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. How are you going to feed those people once you arrive at your destination? How are you going to clothe them? How are you going to provide shelter for those people? So are we to believe that these people are so powerful they could just snap their finger and a building will pop up to house all these so-called slaves? That they know the topography of the land? They know which plants are safe, which plants are poisonous, how to get the food? They knew all that, huh? They had all that ability. When I just read to you the definition that they are slaves, that's that their condition.
You make a very good point, because just like how you had mentioned going to Aswan, because like right up in certain areas of Ghana, there are no street signs. So if you just arrive in Ghana today and you're trying to navigate, you really truthfully do need people that's from there to help you to get around. So being that this is like a heavily foresty area here, if that is so, like how they're purporting, and Europeans came, you got to think about this. How could it be that they brought all of these people from Africa, and then when it came down time for the Underground Railroad, where people were pretty much navigating and fleeing from the south and going all up into the north into Canada and everything, how did people know how to formulate those trails and know how to get to different places? And that would only happen if they already knew that they were from the land and knew the topography and the lay of the land and had the international context there, right there in the land to navigate and do such a thing. So, I mean, you make that's very true.
Yeah, exactly. Unanswered questions. Now,
yeah.
Another thing is this. I make it very, very simple. If you want to, now, because I can read, and if anyone's going to misapply a word and throw it upon us, I have to question that.
Mm-hmm.
See, and the biggest question of all is that they say in their own census report is that they outnumber us. That the present-day pale-skinned Europeans in the Americas are the so-called majority in numbers. Do they not say that?
That is stated.
So that they outnumber us in numbers, correct?
That's what's stated.
If that's the case, according to the people like your Jesse Jacksons and your Al Sharptons, I mean, Jesse Jackson, he brought the number 300 million. He said that they brought over 300 million of us. Now, if they outnumber us 3-1 or 4-1, how did they get to the Americas? Think about that. You see, so if they brought hundreds of millions of Asiatics from so-called Africa on so-called slave ships, that means that they had to have separate ships for themselves, correct?
That is correct, because those boats weren't that large. Yes, you're right. Mm-hmm.
not only did they have to have separate ships for themselves, their wives, their daughters, their sons, and their grandparents and mothers or whatever. Those we can safely deduce were not so-called slave ships, correct?
That is correct.
And if they were not so-called slave ships, those ships were far more than the so-called slave ships because they outnumber us based upon what they're telling us.
Mm-hmm.
So how did they get over there? See, these questions, because that's the first question. You want to get on the topic of slavery, and the word applies to them, and about people coming over to the Americans on boats. We got to ask that question because they tell the world that they outnumber us. The question, I have to direct the question to them. How the hell did you get over here? Until you answer that question, don't even get into the whole discussion or topic of Asiatics being slaves until you answer that question first. Okay? So now let's just get back to some of the powerful statements made in the movie. Now, so while he's on the ship heading to the south, he's sitting down with a couple other Asiatic males. And one of the males made a very powerful statement. He said to Solomon, if you want to survive, do and say as little as possible. Tell no one who you really are. And tell no one you can read and write. Now we have to analyze that statement because that's powerful. So he's advising Solomon, he's basically giving him a survival technique or tactic. To survive this, you must basically become something you're not. Do and say as little as possible. Why is that? Because if that was his condition naturally as a slave, you would never say that. Do and say as little as possible. His condition was naturally a slave. He didn't have any ability to do anything. See, so do not tell anybody who you really are. So it's all about taking on a role. It's acting. It's the great drama.
And that's tying into the vibration of Morisco's having to practice Islam in secret.
Right, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then so they arrive, and then he has an exchange with an Asiatic female named Eliza. And so Eliza's sitting down crying because, she had lost her children. So then Solomon tells her to shut up. And then she states to him, and he tells her, I will offer up my talents to Mr. Ford, Mr. Ford being the master of the plantation. I will offer up my talents to Mr. Ford. Well, why would Solomon do that? I mean, what will happen if Solomon offers up his talents to Mr. Ford? Obviously, Mr. Ford will benefit, and it's safe to say, in a financial way, if Solomon offers up his talents, just like Solomon went on the tour with the two gentlemen who took him down to D.C., and they stated that they made the most ever in a week because they had Solomon on their team. So in this situation, in this relationship, Solomon is offering up his talent to Mr. Ford. And this applies today with us because, people feed and suck off of our blood to survive. And we willingly give up our labor and our talents to others, and others benefit to this day. So that statement is very powerful, and it's still currently playing out. You see, and then Eliza says to Solomon, "You think that he does not know that you are more than you suggest?" And that's powerful. Mm-hmm. So the master of the plantation knows that Solomon is not a slave.